everyone. My name is Martha Ellis, and I'm with the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association. Today, we have two representatives of Emergent, and I'm going to give them a moment to introduce themselves. So would you like to start there?
I'm David Blankenship. I'm the president of Emergent, and that's a software company that we'll talk about. But my background is in fire. Grew up in Colorado Springs Fire. Grew up being bilingual, a technology person that was ruggedized by operations. And then I've done other software things and worked with the Western Fire Chief since then.
Fabulous. And Mike?
Mike Dyke. So I'm the CEO for Hughes Fire Equipment, which is Pierce dealerships, has a lot of different apparatus in the 8 Western states. Prior to that, though, I was fire chief for Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, where I spent 32 years of my fire service career, and I now work with David and the Emergent team.
Mike, would you go ahead and talk a little bit about the inception of Emergent? Where did it come from? Why did the idea even evolve into what it is now?
Yeah, so when I was fire chief at Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, lots of things were happening in the technology space. FirstNet, 2012, the congressional, legislation had gone through, and really we were starting to really push hard on trying to leverage technology for emergency response. Staff had kind of scoured the landscape of vendors that were doing things in that space, but nothing really met the bar with what we were trying to do. It really came from a direction that wasn't first responder friendly. It didn't really fulfill the needs, or the user interface was clunky for first responders in emergencies. So I was actually having a conversation with our Pierce dealer, the owner of Hughes Fire Equipment. He would just happen to be in my office, and would always ask me, what's going on? What are you working on? And I started talking about these complexities and issues, and he said, well, I actually have a software company. I've been working in the healthcare space, but I have some really talented engineers and programmers. How about we look at what you want to do? And we actually engaged with them under a contract, and they started to actually ride with our first responders out on emergency calls. Went to our training center where we set up simulations of a lot of different types of responses, and they started to build what we know today as the Emergent technology. So, and that has been building and growing lightning fast. And I left the organization in 2019, and they wanted to not just have this in-house, but actually push it out commercially to all public safety across the nation. And that's when David and the rest of the team and I got engaged and started to move it forward and make it available.
David, can you talk a little bit about Emergent in the practical application? Talk about the end user experience with actually using the software.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. It's interesting and fun, but it's academic to talk about networks and how things ought to be. The goal of Emergent from the beginning, created by paramedics, by driver engineers, by officers that were running calls, was to have a system on every call that supported them, that gave them information, but more than that, it reduced their cognitive load. That was really the overall thing, as the job is busy, the job is complicated, it's chaotic. And from a couple of perspectives, whether you just need to know what's happening at a glance, in a system that understands where you are, what you're doing, and gives you just the information you need and requires of you very little. I'll talk about that specifically. We manage every place that you go, every occupancy with inspections, every call that you're on. So every fire and medical call, and that quick charting, that situational awareness, that resource management on the fire ground, all of those things. And then one of the things that's unique and special that was created through the work at Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue is that we actually integrate with the apparatus, with the equipment, with the SCBA, with the cardiac monitors. So it's a very practical thing every day, every call, every place that you go. Not for data's sake. I'm a nerd, and I like data, and I like the idea of FirstNet and relentless connectivity. But really, we just grew up in sort of the the mix of FirstNet has come online, we can address things on the fire ground. And so Emergent is born of that fabric and says we can use that network, but not for the network, because we can reduce reporting by 80% for a firefighter. That's what they like. They can know about that patient. They can understand an outcome of what happened when we drop somebody off at an emergency department. So that affects our protocols. It affects our tactics. Just being able to relentlessly see anything anywhere without having to be some kind of PhD computer nerd.
Okay, so that's the boots on the ground, which I love. Now, Mike, as from a leadership perspective, you're clearly capturing a lot of data. Can you speak to some of the other decision making that a chief would have to be making, or a sheriff, or whoever might be applying the software? Where can they take that and leverage it?
Right. It's endless, and that was really the problem with a lot of the early additions, if you will. It was all based on human interaction, a responder pushing a button or entering some data into an interface of some type. We knew that wasn't going to be sustainable moving forward. And we've always heard the term garbage in, garbage out. So if the responders are just pushing the buttons, not necessarily as things are happening, but we're actually leveraging the technology, the machine-to-machine capture, you start to get very accurate, highly useful data for an administrator. For just to use one quick example, my whole career I was trying to get accurate response times, and it was all based on when the responder jumped in the cab and pushed the responding button or the arrive button, and that could have been when they actually responded or arrived, or it could have been sometime different than that. With Emergent and leveraging that telemetry and technology, you can start to collect data points like what time did the vehicle start, the batteries turn on, the brakes release, it went into drive, the wheels rotated, and then you can just imagine that list goes on and on. When you start to create that data lake of really highly accurate data, administrators can work with their crews to understand, hey, we had this outcome, and these were the variables that happened on those types of incidents. If we change our approach, we can start to see different outcomes. We can really start to target what are the best approaches to responding to different emergencies, and we truly get the maximum utilization and the best outcome for our community.
So you bring up an interesting point, and I just want to ask you this. Did you have any issue with labor, with that level of scrutiny for your line?
I think initially there was some apprehension, but we were probably one of the early adopters of data in the fire service. And I think over time, the boots on the ground understood, hey, we're making really good decisions for the organization to fly the organization through varying financial times and budget challenges, staffing challenges. What they saw when we leveraged tools like Emergent was we could tell a story to the community where they fully supported us. They knew we were a sophisticated organization, and we weren't using it as a hammer against the crews. Hey, you're not getting out the door fast enough. We would talk about the performance, but they never saw it as a punitive. They actually saw it as a secret to our success. So I think, in what I've seen now in my role after leaving the fire service and now being as a vendor supporting the fire service, is that's really the norm in public safety. The up-and-comers, new people into public safety that are taking the jobs today, they're used to data and technology. And frankly, when an organization isn't leveraging tools like Emergent, they're a little confused because they drove to work in a car that talked to their phone, that mapped them how to get there. And so why isn't my public safety organization doing what I do in my regular daily life?
Right. And you brought up another really interesting point that I want to ask you about. Talk about some of the economic impacts of applying this type of technology in the fire service.
Well, and granted, my background's primarily fire and EMS, but to street a unit, I mean, the apparatus is $1 million for a pumper, maybe $2 million for a ladder. To staff that station for a year could be $2 million. I mean, these are significant budgetary impacts. So if I can really maximize and know where to place my fire stations based on performance, how to staff them, what types of units need to be in the bays to respond to the community, because every community is a little different. You know, an aging community is going to have a different call set than maybe industrial community. So knowing what the actual right package of resources to send out the door and fly that organization to really perform well, and then share the information with the community on how we're doing. We saw over the last 10 years outstanding community support, and when we truly needed to go to the ballot box for additional funds, we'd see really high results, 70, 80, 90% yes, which usually people don't say yes or like saying yes for increases in taxes or other support. And they did because of our use of data and technology.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of FirstNet now, as it's moved quite far down the road and clearly has a great future ahead of it. What do you see FirstNet's role in the ongoing success of Emergent?
I think that for us, we believe in it foundationally. So we have gotten to the point where we are so interested in all the connections to the wheels, to the alternators, to all the things that connectivity is foundational, and it's possible. And I'm not talking in a general telecom way. A broadband network created for and by public safety that is influenced by public safety, that is committed to that with an authority that really presses the best interests of public safety. So for us as a vendor, it might sound strange to be in there, but we have become IoT embedded partners of FirstNet's, so that when we talk about a solution for a firefighter on the ground, I don't have to punt connectivity to a third party. It means that I can say and look a fire chief or a fire captain in the eye and say, I will make your life easier. I'll reduce your reporting. I'll reduce your cognitive demand. I'll give you joint operational situational awareness, and comms will be foundational. But nobody wants to talk about data any more than they want to talk about networks. But what FirstNet does for us is actually give us the weight that we can even do this. We can innovate because the network is available. So I think there's been so much focus on creating the network and the power of the network. This is the part where it's like ... This is the so what.
Right.
This is the so what. It's so that firefighters can do their job, so that we can have data to make decisions, And you asked a management and labor question. This is truth. If we understand what's happening, then reasonable people have a discussion. If we want to plan where a new station goes, we don't even do those analytics. We make perfect data for things that happen. And there's a subtlety there, that the connectivity that is prolific and relentless that comes with FirstNet, that can work when everything else is on the ground and doesn't work, is the same sort of thing we've adopted as a mentality, learning the lesson from FirstNet that went before us, that says we have to be able to make that connection and make that functionality happen anytime, anywhere. So as a fire chief, I know he would say, as a technologist, I would say the software focus has to be interoperability. And so that has baked into our DNA. So things that the data that we generate in this software in real time can flow to any software package. Puts fire chiefs back in control. It gives you control of your decisions and your outcomes. And ironically, as much as we're talking about Emergent today, the idea is that we disappear. The way that you and I, or a firefighter on the street today, would talk about technology is that they wouldn't. They pull an iPhone or an Android out of their pocket and they download an app and they do stuff with an app, and there's no teacher. It's just information at your fingertips. You want to share, you want to be connected. And that's the whole idea, is make it not the topic of discussion because it's hard or bad. Just make it seamless, so the job is the job.
Right, completely intuitive.
Yeah, people talk about, the fire service being unwilling to adapt over time, or 150 years unimpeded by progress or something. And I couldn't disagree more. I think there are people doing a job. They want tools that make it easier. And when they don't have barriers and they can just help people and love people and just really intervene, that's a mission that's the reason they do it. And so when the technology gets easy and becomes passive and helps them, then actually our communities are stronger. So it's sort of the ripple effect of FirstNet to the street. And I think that's a story that can sort of be lost in telecom wars or different things like that. Is like there are people, first responders, like born out of 9/11, that's where this in from, that are doing a hard thing. And there's a simple way that we can get out of their way and let them work. And so to the extent we get back to that, then we're doing our job.
Well, and I think it's interesting the point that you're making, because so often you get this proprietary blinders, right? And nobody wants their software to do anything with anybody else's software because somehow they feel that's an encroachment on their technology, right? But what we are talking about here is there are some actually really valuable platforms out there that may not be intrinsic to your software, but you can certainly leverage the data that software is collecting and aggregate it in a way that leadership can leverage it and boots on the ground can leverage it. So
yeah, if you didn't remember anything else we talked about, like what I would hope people would get out of this is that's the pattern, is that it sounds counterintuitive, that our software will move data wherever it belongs in real time to competitors. And I'm not worried about that competition. The pattern is what is important. And if software companies think they can do it better than Emergent, and they can do it with open data, with complete interoperability, with a business model that's priced on consumption. So the littlest fire department has a world-class software like the biggest fire department, and everybody can participate, then come on and do that.
So you're saying there's a graduation to the actual use based on the size of the agencies? So you're putting it in striking distance of these smaller agencies.
That's the point. And the fire service and all of public safety, is made up of the fabric of this country. It's volunteers, it's combinations. And why should a department that has 300 calls be a second-class citizen to some major metro?
Yeah.
And why, as a vendor, and I could answer that question, would you ignore 2/3 of the first responders in this company? Don't fly the flag if you're not going to walk the walk. So consumption as a model, if you have, for example, 300 calls, $300, I can understand that. You can understand that. And that same interoperability is what FirstNet network is about. That's the pattern for us as creators of software and technology people too.
Awesome. So, will you share your vision for the future of Emergent? Where do you see this going?
So it was when listening to you and David talk, I was flashing back 10 years ago. They said, well, if we make FirstNet, how will you use it? What do you want? Well, we didn't even know. We didn't know what it was capable of. And now that we do, I see the future. It's going to explode. It is exploding. As I travel around and talk to fire chiefs and fire departments across the country, they all have the same issues. They're all trying to solve the same problems, and it's getting a good snapshot and picture into what's going on. I need to leverage these other tools. They have staffing programs, all these different programs that don't talk to each other. Really where I see this going is truly creating that common operating picture and that ecosystem that everyone wants now. They want it today. And we have the network established and the platforms like Emergent to deliver that. So where I see this going is we are getting a great response from the community because they've been looking for something like that. And then they're starting to connect all these different systems. I see the vendor community, like even the ones that we support through Hughes Fire, is seeing this coming to and starting to operate and interoperate and connect to systems like Emergent, so that their data flows in with all the other tools and things in compartments. Or, we talk a lot about fire and EMS. There's a whole nother segment of public safety with law enforcement and then there's other tiers, public works and other folks that are in that public safety sphere that have equipment and needs that also are very, very similar. I see that creating this massive common operating picture a reality in the future because of a network like FirstNet that has proven over and over again that it's capable and ready to deliver. And then tools like Emergent, solutions like Emergent and others connecting all those different data points. But most importantly, putting it in a user interface that's easy for a first responder to use. It's not a cumbersome thing that they have to add to their list. It's just there when they need it. Otherwise, they're just delivering great service to the community.
And it's interesting because philosophically, it actually just plays right into the breaking down of silos that the interoperability, it's just interoperability in a different way within an agency or within a jurisdiction and those sorts of things to be able to share all that data. So any last thoughts that you want to add?
I think that you make an interesting point about interoperability. That's a buzzword that even as people see this or hear this, that just goes in one ear and out the other. It's a meaningless frame or a common operating picture. But when you have the ability to move data anywhere in real time, and when we can operate and push this capability to the front edge of American public safety, then what we actually had when we're talking, the way I think about interoperability is we shine a light on the problems. You cannot have paywalls to move data back and forth between companies. Exactly. That if I put data into a system, you cannot charge me to read my own wristwatch. So we can be in that community and say no paywalls. We can say we can produce this data that's clean and better than having firefighters do all of that work for data collection. So if we can accomplish something for operations and something for data interoperability in a real way, then that we feel like we're sort of paying it forward so innovators can come and say, so you've unshackled this data, you move this data anywhere, you've set this pattern in a market where to compete, you have to remove your paywall. That puts fire chiefs and fire departments back in control.
Right.
You can put the best athlete in the race, and whether that's Emergent or whether that's somebody else that has that same philosophy and mindset to use a network to actually move data, then analytics people, common operating people that are much smarter than we are can figure out how to use that data.
Well, I appreciate that. And that was where I was going with the whole interoperability philosophy. So that was great. Thank you for building on that. So again, I want to thank Mike Dyke and David Blankenship. My name is Martha Ellis. I'm with the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association, and this has been a discussion about the incredible work that Emergent is doing for the public safety sphere.